and consulting producer and writer Walter Mosley.
You're gonna hold it for me. Thank you.
All right, so, spoiler alert, Iran-Contra.
Iran-Contra.
Iran-Contra. Is that like the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Americans? Is this our end game here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, look, part of what was always the design of this show was that it was not only kind of about crack and what did to South Central, but exploring a little bit of what the CIA's role might have been in bringing in cocaine to fund that war, which there's kind of a lot of chatter about and stories about and not a lot of official word. But at this point, with all the research we've done, you can kind of safely say that there was some looking the other way.
Well, that was one of the things that made it stand out for me immediately was the fact that it was it's a crime thriller.
Right.
It's a crime thriller, and it's got all the things that you when you watch something like this, it's got the gang bosses, the people facing off like it's a Western.
Right.
We're trying to read each other's motives, double crosses, and all that stuff. But then there's this other layer to it.
Yeah.
That's it's regional, it's national, and it's global.
Yeah, it's got, it's kind of a geopolitical thriller, but then at the base there's the story about these really young guys who kind of change their lives and stumble into this drug and don't have any idea what they're a part of in any of the bigger sense. They're just trying to change the game.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your character and your performance on the show. Like I personally, my reaction to it is I feel like Franklin is a character who, as I see him, he has a little bit more awareness than than the people he travels with. Like I see he seems like he's operating one layer up from everybody else, almost to the point where it seems like he's seeing this as a drama that he's in. Like, what's his next move going to be? Am I just imagining all this stuff, or are you going for something like that?
Yes, you are imagining everything.
I am. Well,
I have no idea what I'm doing.
What's my next question?
No, I believe you're right. I believe Franklin understands that the drug game is a tricky game. And the fact that so much has happened to him and he's been through so much in the space of 3-4 weeks, he knows that there's going to be a bunch of obstacles along the way and that the people in his family and around him, he's going to be responsible for them. And they're kind of just enjoying the money, kind of forgetting all the important things that might come along the way. And they do come a long way in season 2.
And it's because he's English that he knows all this.
We spoke about you being racist and
For Dave and for Walter, this kind of relationship between this protagonist and the rest of the world, it seems to me that when you're telling a gangster story, you have two choices ultimately for a character like this who's on his way to he's hopefully going to be another bigwig. You're either Sonny Corleone or you're Michael.
Right.
Wow.
Like that. Those there is, and they quote from Scarface, and that's a Sonny.
That's
a Sonny.
It had just been released. This is the December of '83, and it had just been released.
Yeah.
So
and
we
of course
actually
they're right on top of it.
Right on top. I mean, it was it's their
Yeah.
world.
So my question is, how do you write dialogue and description so that it is plausible that Franklin can be reading the room? We get a sense, I feel like I know what he's thinking, more or less, like not exactly, and I know what he's feeling, but I believe that no one else in the room can see it, that he's hiding it.
Yes.
It sounds hard to me to write something like that.
I mean, look, I think a lot of the credit goes to, and I hate publicly giving him credit for anything, but I'll say that I give a lot of credit to Damson.
Oh, really? Okay.
I know. Look, I mean, he does, in being the leader of anything like this, you have to kind of have this duality, right? You have to put on one face for the people who you want to follow you, and then you know inside that there are all these other things going on.
Well, in the audience is allowed to know. Like, not everything, because you don't want to give it away.
But there's one other thing. I was thinking, watching it, there's some great actors in this show. There are like these great actors, and everybody, like, Damson certainly is like, playing the role of the guy in charge. But everybody else, their acting makes that true. It says there's nobody, there's conflict. There's some people who understand more. There's some people who understand less. But everybody is doing it to make sure that the show works. It's really, it's astonishing how good they are. I mean, it's like such a young cast, but there's like a good 8 or 9 really great actors in this.
The rest are horrible.
That's right.
No, Walter's right.
You aren't one of the 8.
it is an embarrassment of riches to have an ensemble kind of this big and have them all be that good and just getting better every day. It's really incredible to watch them all.
Are you from Southern California?
Yeah, I was born in LA and grew up in LA till I was, in fairness, about 10, and then my family moved east. But I did grow up in LA in the 80s, not in South Central.
Yeah, so for both of you, the Los Angeles-ness of this show, can you talk a little bit about how you represent that in terms of the story and finally, ultimately, what we see on screen? Like, to me, this is my home, but I spend a lot of time in Los Angeles, and this show probably more than, there's a lot of shows that are set in LA. This show more than any other sounds like Los Angeles.
Right.
And it almost, I feel like the air temperature changes when I'm watching this show.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of that is due to somebody like Walter being a part of it, and obviously John Singleton, who was there from the inception, and that's just authenticity you can't find any other way. And we have consultants. We use a gentleman named Dub C, a rapper from West Side Connection, who was actually a really big part of getting Damson up to speed, because, look, we had a lot of conversations about casting Damson. He's obviously incredible, but he's also British, as you can kind of hear. But it was a conversation. It was like, are we going to bring a British guy in to play a guy from, and if we're going to do that, we got to make sure that he's on top of it. And look, his first audition tape, the first thing we saw was a tape sent from London, and he was already, his accent was very good. I mean, he's classically trained. But it was very important to get not only the dialogue and the dialect, but the rhythms of the speech right.
It's also so hard to tell because, you know, some of those scenes, the scene in the junkyard is just so gorgeous. I mean, it's like you're looking at LA, you know, you're experiencing LA. I mean, and also a lot of things, you know, not too much was done on sets. You know, we went out all over Los Angeles to shoot, and that also helps because you're feeling it. You know, it's really strong.
Yeah, a lot of credit to the crew. You know, our locations team and production design for going and finding these spots. I mean, they're out there. You can find these places in LA that still don't feel like they've aged a tremendous amount, especially in South Central and East LA where we shoot most of our show, and then it all looks great. And I'm glad you brought up how great it looks because our DP John Lindley actually snuck in here this evening and is hiding out in the very back corner. And he's in the very back. You can't see him, but I'd love to give it up for John. I mean, legendary Field of Dreams. Just he's been doing it forever, and he's such a huge part of what we do, and the look of the show, which I am constantly blown away by.
Well, actually, during the Q&A, now that you've told me that, during the Q&A, I will have a question for you.
Sorry, John. He's probably really upset I outed him.
Incognito tonight, but that's just not going to happen. Yeah. So just to follow on this, Walter, you have chronicled Los Angeles. You have chronicled Los Angeles in addition to, you know, all the other things that you do. You are kind of a historian, like a dramatic historian, because you know the place is so important, and your places are not necessarily the same places of Raymond Chandler or Jim Rockford from the Rockford Files,
which Chase also created, which is fantastic. But yes.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, it's so interesting, you know, because you're mentioning, you know, the Corleones and stuff like that, and one of the things that's really important, as much as I like The Wire, as far as the acting, the directing, the producing, I mean, all that stuff, but you know, it was black people playing like they were Italians. I mean, it's like. If you're like a black kid and you're living in the hood and somebody who deals drugs shoots you, your family, you know, who have never been criminals before, are going to come out and kill those people. That's like, there's no, oh, we can't do that because they're the mob. You know, fuck the mob. We're going to go kill those people. You know, and that's the kind of way it is. So the thing that I was so happy about. Like, you know, that scene where the two guys are breaking in, they said, shit, them niggas got some money. We're going to go get that money. You know, I said, that's what would happen, you know. And, you know, and it's just more like if you can just kind of ease into the way that the neighborhoods existed over time, you know. And at that particular time, that was Los Angeles, you know. I mean, you know, Eric Amadio and John Singleton, I mean, you know, them coming up with it, it was really kind of wonderful. And people just kind of following it through and really making a really long-term commitment to making it work. You know.
History, I have found, you know, this was true. I grew up in Dallas, and it was true for Dallas, and it's true now that I live in New York, and I'm sure it's true for Los Angeles as well. people who move to Los Angeles, I don't feel that they carry the living history of a city in the way that people who were born and raised there do.
I know, but since nobody in Los Angeles was born there, they kind of in a way are. It says, listen, man, I live in my car, and don't fuck with me. That's Los Angeles, right? It's like so. It's like. So it's a difficult. If it was that easy, because like people who live in Brooklyn, they live in Brooklyn. Say, yeah, for her. But not in L.A. Everybody's different. Everybody comes from someplace else. Everybody wants to change everything around them. Hollywood is there. It's a really, and so it becomes very difficult to represent Los Angeles because there's all these different areas, right? There's the Persian neighborhood. There's the Armenian neighborhood.
Yes.
I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. And this the sort of, we could almost say like, anthropological details that find their way into your, fiction.
And all through this film. I mean, you see all these different people, He's going to see his dad, in the Midwest, in the snow, because there's all kinds of different things going on in people's lives, their heads, and I think that there was a deep commitment, but then again, it's also by the writers, also by the actors, by everybody setting up the scene to make everybody is different, but they have to work together, and I think that that's what's really beautiful about the show, that it really you really feel it, even if you don't know anything about Los Angeles.
Yes.
It's not like any other city you ever felt.
Right.
That's a fact. You always said, no, I haven't been this. This is not like the Bronx.
Yes. Well, and also the way that the story is told, the way that it's written, but also the way that it's acted and directed. There's not a lot of adjectives, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's not like there are some shows I love them. So they've ended up on my top 10 list, many times. Like where it's all exclamation points and semicolons, and like they're the too muchness of it is part of the show. That's not the case with this. This is a very lean show, and it almost seems like you're trying to say, how little information can we give people and still have them know what's going on, right?
Yeah, we do that.
That's because they took on way too much. You got 3 storylines going, so you don't have any time for somebody to sit back and say, damn, I got to scratch my balls. No, you ain't got time for that, man. Let's see what the Mexicans are doing. What is the CIA doing?
Well, I feel like viewers are so savvy now. I mean, yes, Walter's right. We bit off a whole bunch, but I feel like this season I'm particularly excited about because of how much convergence there is in the worlds, and it actually made our lives a little easier, where it's like we didn't feel at a certain point like we had to set up 3 different worlds. Like it all felt very interconnected, which made things.
And you don't have to worry, I guess, so much that you're giving everything more or less equal weight in a given episode, and like now it's time to switch to this. Like instead of having a bunch of parallel tracks, now you're going to have.
Yeah. Look, we kind of just went to the things that interested us on any given day in that room, knowing kind of the bigger story we want to tell. But some episodes this season do end up being heavier Teddy episodes, and then a lot of episodes are obviously heavier in Franklin's world, where we just have, a bigger cast and more to kind of play with. And look, that is the story ultimately, right? Is what cracked it to South Central, and so you want to spend a lot of time there.
How do you keep things historically accurate and also accurate in terms of what people are doing?
Right.
And what they're saying, and like the way that a drug deal would be conducted, I only know from television how something like that looks. But I'm sure there's a certain protocol, and it probably varies depending on what group is dealing with
drugs. What drug dealer you talk to, you get a lot of different answers for how drug deals happen.
Yeah.
But we have a couple people we keep on the payroll. One in particular who kind of came on last year. Who goes by Smokey, who dealt crack in South Central to help, first of all, with the cooking of it when we first introduced it, to make sure that those steps were accurate. And then he was on set.
I'm a professional now.
Yeah, if y'all need some crack whipped up. But we had him there.
It's artisanal.
It's artisanal. It's very,
Coppola does it too.
Crockery next door to the winery. Yes.
Oh, no.
But you have those people on set all the time.
on the stage right
to
now?
Make sure. To make sure everything's accurate and to the best of our ability, that is really how these things go down.
And what about the history? The history, like how faithful are you to exactly what happened? And also, do you take the time frame into account? Like if this story, if I handed you a calendar, what year is this supposed to be?
So that's December '83.
December '83, okay.
Yep.
So if I handed you a calendar, could you tell me roughly what days or weeks this is that the level you get to?
Yeah, I mean, very, very much so. Being kind of true to that timeline, and knowing, because as far as the research, it was a very specific timeline for when things started to turn. I mean, the way that everybody talks about it was that in the summer of '83, life in South Central was still pretty much as it had been, which was that it was a, it wasn't perfect, but it was a working class neighborhood.
Right.
And by the time the Summer Olympics landed in 1984, it was like a bomb had been dropped on the city.
By the time Damson got through with it, it was all messed up.
Right. And then it's like, how does that happen? How does that something happen that comes in and that quickly like ravages everything?
Yeah.
And so the timeline is really important. And listen, as it is with regards to the Contras and the war being fought down there. So we really try to stick pretty closely to how things happen.
But you can tell, listen, the people I talked to who were there then, like, there's hardly any like argument about it, which is one thing, the historical and data, the facts, all that stuff, that's great. But the other thing is to have the feeling of it.
Right.
And everybody who I know who was in LA at that time, I haven't heard anybody say, no, that wasn't it, it didn't feel like that, it wasn't like that. No, I was like, man, they got it, shoot, they got it.
Down
What
to the
did it
music,
fe-
right?
Yeah.
What did it feel like?
Well,
How
you
is
know-
it different from now?
Well, I think that it was, as it's really clear. Like, it was really clear in this episode. This is the first time we've seen this episode, but it's like it was a time of innocence. This is a kind of some very innocent people who like got involved in something which changed them absolutely, and everything around them absolutely. So it's kind of like an age of innocence in a way.
That's interesting you should say that, because I got this feeling and I thought, that's crazy. But I feel like I'm watching a bunch of drug dealers, and I'm also thinking these poor bastards don't know what they're in for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a big part of, that's something we've discussed a lot, thinking about the arc of the show and however many seasons it takes, but that at what point do they start to realize, and specifically does Franklin start to realize, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like I think that being a drug dealer, certain things are going to come along with that. You're going to face certain obstacles, hardships, but at what point do you take a step back and realize, oh, I'm destroying everything I love?
How smart is Franklin, really?
Very.
He's
You
very.
know?
He's,
I mean,
he's
like, how much foresight did, like, how?
You can't ask Damson that question. You know what the answer is going to be. He's very, very
He's
smart.
a brilliant man.
He's extremely smart, man. He's right on it.
But for me, with
I guess I
researching
wonder,
Franklin,
is he confident or is he overconfident?
no, definitely not overconfident. I'd say he needs to be confident
Yeah.
in order to be able to pull off what he does pull off. When I was researching Franklin and kind of looking into the whole crack cocaine epidemic, I tried to stay away from it as much as possible, even because I was thinking I don't want to be too conscious of what's going to happen in the future. And I remember I stayed downtown, and then I was walking down Skid Row, and I was looking at what our show is, and 2018, the story we're telling has now caused this.
Yes.
I can't play that if in the show. I can't let Franklin show to everyone that in the future, because then he's unremorseful and he's evil, and you can't relate to him.
Yes. Yes.
He's smart, but he's not a fortune teller.
Right.
He's
right.
not. He can't possibly know what's coming, and nobody can. And that's a note every once in a while you have to kind of give, as obvious as it sounds, because you're doing something that's period, where everybody knows how the story ends, but they can't.
Yes.
Like, you got to have some fun with it.
Okay, so now I have to ask a kind of a super granular, nerdy acting question. When you are building this guy, when you're building this character, who is not you, you're going to have to inhabit the mental space of somebody else. Is there any particular practical things that you do, like with your voice, with your body, with your posture, the way that you look at people, the way that you behave?
Yeah.
Just the little details of it. Like,
Yeah.
can you give us some examples of just how does Franklin move through the world? How does he look? What is his energy?
He definitely looks around a lot. That's one thing I wanted to incorporate. Kind of in a conversation, not always looking at someone, kind of looking over his shoulder almost. He's always kind of tense and wondering what's going to come, so he's prepared, if that makes sense. With regards to the physical stuff, manipulation was a big factor for me. Franklin, for me, is like a chameleon. He's a little boy when he's talking to his mum and to Melody, and then he's a man when he's talking to Jerome and Louis and Leon and Kevin, because he's their boss. And that was an important thing for me with Franklin. I wanted an audience to kind of see themselves in Franklin, because often I felt drug dealers are seen as these menacing people on screen who we can't relate to. I can never be Tony Montana. I can't. When I see Tony Montana, as much as I love that movie, the choices he made, I wouldn't make those choices because I'm too much of a wimp.
Right.
But with Franklin, from the first episode, when he walks into Arvy's house and he unfortunately makes that decision to take that key,
Yeah.
everything he does from that time forward, an audience member will go, I would have done that too because I don't have a choice.
He reminds me, your performance reminds me of almost a Clint Eastwood or Steve McQueen sort of thing where you don't know. Sometimes there's something impassive, like the shield goes down on this guy.
Yeah.
And particularly when the other people are trying to intimidate him. I see that, and it's not like you don't compensate by how can I have a meaner face than the other person. It's more like let's drain everything.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I respect the actors I work with who are those type of characters, the RVs, the Swims, and they're often characters. You could almost draw them. They could be in cartoons. And when I work with them, I feel the more still and quiet and silent I am, the more beautiful they look, almost. That's kind of one thing I always looked at doing. One of my teachers once told me, if they go up, go down. If they go down, go up. And that's how I perform in Snowfall.
Walter, when you watch movies, particularly when you watch crime and hard-boiled sorts of things, what kinds of characters, what kind of performances appeal to you? Like, what do you like to see, and what do you not like to see? What drives you crazy and just like, turn this off? I can't take this.
Snowfall.
Yeah. So awful. I turned it off while we're watching. No. Well, you know, it's a hard question. I'm going to answer that in another way, right? Because the one thing that has to be said, this is a show about America, and therefore, to some degree, to a great degree in this thing, it's a show about race. But race is like an interesting thing. You know, one of the things I always tell people is I don't really believe in the existence of white people. I mean, they believe in themselves, but they're not white people, and they only became that in America. And so when you really look at things, you're looking at people like Avi. You're looking at at the CIA. You're looking at all these, and they're very, very different kinds of people. And so like if I'm allowed to see a world that feels real, it's dramatically heightened, but it feels real, then I'm really happy because I know that's the world I live in, and I know that's what that's what America needs to know. That's what America needs to know. This show,
yes,
because it shows where they're coming from and where they're going, and I think it's really important. And so that's what I want to see, and that's what they're doing. It's great.
It sounds almost like you're describing tribes.
Yeah, well, but that is true. Like if you go back to to ancient England, there were like 8 races. There was the Picts and the Scots and the Celts and everything goes on. And they didn't think they were the same race. There were all these different tribes of people who were dealing with each other when they had to and killing each other when they could get away with it.
When you look back on that period, what do you think the world around us owes to it, both of you?
Well, Miami owns everything to it, but I think that built a consciousness in America, and a consciousness in America came out of that for better and for worse. Gang consciousness, but also it allowed people like Franklin to enter into the world in a way that he was completely held out of all the time before. Before the 60s, black people, Chicanos, completely out. But now, all of a sudden, a door opened, and they could change things. They probably are not going to benefit from it, but their kids are, and their grandkids are, and that becomes a really important thing. Right? They were doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, we got asked a lot last year about why do we need this show, right? Why do we need to go through this? I know there were people who were like, why do we need to relive crack and that awful time? But I don't know if this country fully understands the impact that it had on the black community. I mean, once you really kind of deep dive on it, you realize there was slavery, there was Reconstruction, there was Jim Crow, and there was crack. And each of those things had maybe an equal impact on the community. It set those communities back in a way that you can't even quantify. And now you look at where we are, and it's like, how did we get to this place? How did we get to this place where this guy's? I mean, this guy's been elected, and the violence is what it is. And you're like, well, take a look back a little bit.
What did crack do that was different from those other three?
What did John Singleton always said? He said crack cocaine was the only thing that made black women leave their babies.
Leave their babies.
Slavery didn't do that. Jim Crow didn't do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, in slavery, they sold their babies, you know, and the fathers and stuff like that. But this is a thing where they actually willingly gave up things. Yes, and it's true. You know, it had a giant impact. Though there's a lot of like really powerful, creative people came out of that time too. So it's really I don't know. It's like it's negative, but it's weird. I mean, how strong it impacted the future.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So much of hip hop, like such a big part of our culture is hip hop, and hip hop, you could argue that form of it, NW, I mean, that all came out of that gang violence, and that was all a result of crack. And like, if that doesn't hit, what is that? I don't know.
That was another thing I was going to ask you about. Was there has been debate about this, about the idea that crack was somehow quantifiably worse or stronger than any other drug? That there was something singular about it, because of course, as you know, in the 80s and the 90s, crack was used as this boogeyman, this word, and it almost became like a dog whistle racism word. And you know, crack babies. When I remember, this was my era. You know, this is the 80s and 90s are my time, and I remember that's like we got to battle crack. We got to do something about crack. And there were people who said that would basically was like black people. That was what that meant for a lot of politicians, including Mr. Reagan, who we see here.
I mean, look, the DEA was formed by, you think of it, it was really Nixon, and it was that we're going to be hard on crime. It was his thing. He was the tough on crime, and you know, Reagan gets attributed to that, but literally the DEA was not formed until Nixon decided we needed that, and it very much became a war on black people. You watch the 13th, and like the laws and the punishments for crack cocaine were so much harsher than powder cocaine.
Yeah, if it was white people, it would have been a national emergency.
Yes.
So-called white people.
Well, right now the opioid epidemic is it's a health
the
scare.
opioid epidemic, right? Yeah.
Crack was a health scare.
So when black people were doing heroin, nobody cared.
Yeah.
You know, and people did care about crack because they made so much money on it. And that was the other thing. They made a lot of money. Like there was a lot of money going on there. I love that scene, you know, with Damson sitting there, and there's all that money all around him, you know, and he's just sitting there, me and my money, you know.
I like that. That's his Damson face. Yeah. That's his Franklin face.
You guys don't like me, do you?
Well, would it be okay if we open the floor to some questions?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. So put the lights up, and I think we. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. For starters, yes.
Beautiful work. Thank you so much. My question to Mr. Mosley: are you going to, or do you plan to write in HIV/AIDS and its impact parallel to the play?
You know, the question is the show going to do it? I'm not even sure I'll be there. So it's more a question for Dave, really. But actually, it is a question for Dave. What do you think?
Here's what I think. I think we should all give it up for Walter Mosley and let him know that I can't do the show without him, so that Walter will come back and do more of the show, and then it can be a Walter Mosley question. Walter, by the way, wrote the 3rd episode this year, which is maybe my favorite episode that we've ever done on the show. It's incredible, and he really is the real deal. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm not sure. It depends on how long we get to go and how we dovetail into that, but yes, sure, in some way we'll touch on it.
In the front.
Yes, this is my question for Damson.
Like, he has such, like, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up, I had cousins who was affected by the drug epidemic. There's like this sweet Franklin, like boy next door, like, and you remind me of that. The character reminds me of my cousin who's like innocent, and he's in this, and he's making all these choices, and you're kind of seeing his innocence being lost. My question is, how do you play it without Franklin being taken away by the ambition or blinded by his ambition and still being kind of like this sweet kind of guy next door type of guy?
By having many things to lose, I believe. His mom being a huge factor for him. Like I was saying, every time Franklin, we see him this season, we see him make many tough decisions and choices. But every time he's with his mom, he goes back to being that sweet little kid who was coming home, helping her with the groceries. And I think that's so relatable for an audience. And I think that's the way he keeps his innocence, his mother.
What a great question. Where were you when I was writing these questions? Next, yes.
Thank you. I actually grew up in Long Beach and Carson during the early 80s, so this authenticity.
Forgive me, I recognize you.
We met a year ago, actually.
You came to one of these before?
Bill Sears.
Wow.
Wow, you remember. That's impressive.
You're always front row.
In the first season, the three storylines were kind of kept separate in terms of the characters interacting. Are we going to see more of that in this current season? Was always that the ultimate goal for them to more intersect?
Very much so.
And so that's what's so beautiful about that last scene. So you see them together finally, you know,
First
and it's
time.
like it's great,
Yeah.
you know, it's great.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely the goal for the season, is to really feel why these three worlds and how are they all interconnected, and we dive, by the end of that third episode, it's all completely intertwined.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm wondering how you and maybe other members of the cast developed a spatial understanding of Los Angeles during that time period. Are there particular references? I mean, obviously, E.C. Rollins historically would be a fantastic resource, but are there particular things that you're using to get a better understanding of, for example, where it's safe for you in terms of self-preservation to go or not go, or behave in a certain way or not behave in a certain way? How do you work through those kinds of things?
We all do it individually, really. My main person was Dub C. I think every time I have a conversation with Dub C, I instantly feel like I'm from LA. And I stay in the accent all day as well. And as soon as they yell cut, we're off in the corner, gibbering about, talking about, you know, where he's from and experiences he's been through. And from that, I'm able to instantly dive into Franklin, feel what it feels like to be a kid from South Central. So that's definitely my one. The rest of the cast, they were just brilliant and already had it.
But you know, one of the things is when they work together, like it was always about to explode. Like there was so much passion. And I think you saw it in a couple of scenes there when the people got killed. You know, there was so much. You'd see them, you know, going through the scene so powerfully that it was almost like, you know, the creation of a continent or something. They're really like just banging up against each other, because that was a lot of the nature of the relationships, and I think that they created it, you know, ensemble, which is kind of wonderful. But I don't think, not necessarily consciously. It's just things started to happen.
Yeah, there's been somewhere around the fourth episode, John Landgraf from FX called and basically said something is happening this year that didn't necessarily feel like it was happening last year with the alchemy of this. I don't know what that is, that chemistry, and how long it takes for them to all kind of, but now they've all got such deep roots and they've all kind of collided in this way where you feel it kind of in every frame. You feel the family of it, which has been pretty special and interesting to watch because it's so unquantifiable. I don't know how it kind of happened, but
In the third episode, we were shooting this one scene, and like at the end of each scene, people came out crying. They were like, it was wild, you know. And I'm like, God, you feel it? I don't feel it. I'm like, how can you feel it? What's wrong with you? You know. But it was like, you know. But that's like when you know that they really not only did they like the. Not only did they like the story, they liked what the story was saying. I don't know if there's a difference there, and they identify with it, you know, and that's really it's really fun.
Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you all so much for being here. Mr. Mosley touched a little bit on the opioid epidemic that we're in now. And question for any of you, do you feel that the show is in conversation with that in a way? Or are you trying more to stick to 1983? Do you feel like it's implied?
I mean, I think this country's history with drugs we continue to kind of repeat ourselves, and I think that it's worth looking at this and through the lens of just kind of what this is, but I think it certainly should reverberate for how we deal with drugs and the punishments for drugs and the rehab, and it's a fully broken, how we've chosen to deal with it is just completely broken, and I don't know at what point somebody wants to kind of stop and acknowledge that, but I certainly think there are echoes within each of those other periods.
I'd say the opioid crisis is really scary. I mean, but there's fact 115 overdose cases every day, you know, and why doesn't everyone know about this completely? Why isn't it? I feel like it's almost being kept under wraps almost. And that's kind of what crack was as well.
Well, it might be the chemical companies. I mean, I don't know for a fact.
You threw it up there to him. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, he was going to alley-oop it.
Of course he was.
Might be. You know, that's not really addictive if you take it right. I mean, you know.
Anyone else?
Well, I think that's kind of good, but for me at least, having been on the white side of the cocaine era, before crack cocaine, there's such a romanticizing of that era, and I think that this de-romanticizes the Wolf of Wall Street cocaine thing, and I think that's a really good thing, which I applaud you for. And also, I mean, I'm a firm believer that the war on drugs actually created the drug problem, so I hope we'll see more of the hatred between the CIA and the DEA and the FBI, which actually created the whole drug problem we have now.
You're going to really like this season of television.
Yeah. You will.
Yeah, there's no glamorizing crack. You can't even try.
It's been so romanticized in so many movies that kids see it and they think, oh yeah, this is really great. Well, maybe it's time that they see that it's really not so great. Certainly crack cocaine will.
Yeah.
You know, it occurs to me that this show, it's 1983. 1 year later, Miami Vice debuted.
Yeah.
And Miami Vice, well, you know, certainly it was, I remember I was shocked by how political it was, that show. Like but it also had the clothes, the boats, the cars.
Yeah.
And I remember the whole ritual of, you know, they cut the bag open and they taste the knife and all that. It was almost like it was like David Copperfield was about to make the Statue of Liberty disappear. There was so much fanfare to it. But, you know, and at the same time, this is going on and this is not like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the things about the attractiveness of it, like there's one kind of attractiveness of it that, oh, you know, it's so great and you're doing this and there's the sex and there's the yachts and all sorts of stuff. But, you know, the other thing is like, well, I got a choice. I could work at McDonald's or I could deal cocaine. And said, well, you might have to kill somebody. Fuck, I killed 20 people if I get to have some money. You know, so I mean, there's a thing that there's going to be there's a certain amount of romanticization because of capitalism, which of course, you know, is a whole other thing that we're not going to get to. But you know, but in that show, but I mean, there is an issue. So yeah, sure, I'll risk my life rather than living the rest of my life making minimum wage. Which,
that's the shame, really.
Yeah.
I feel like if a bunch of these drug dealers were offered jobs, 9 to 5s, and they'd still turn it down,
Right.
in order to sell crack.
9 to 5 at McDonald's is not good, I'll tell you.
Not good.
It'll kill you faster than cocaine.
Well, and that was part of the construction of Franklin, where it wasn't, look, you could have made Franklin a guy who had no options and no outs, right? But we didn't. It was the original conception and we stayed with it. This was a guy who had been to a school in the Valley, who was clearly smart, who could have kind of done whatever he wanted to, but just kind of knew ultimately the game was rigged and I'm not going to play that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play that game.
Yeah, and I almost wonder, like in another universe, would this guy have been Bill Gates?
He would have been a CEO, there's no
Right.
question.
Yeah.
Fortune
Right,
500.
He is Bill Gates. It's just the crack Bill Gates. You know,
But isn't Bill
this-
Gates the crack Bill Gates, if you want to get technical?
Yeah, well, you know, absolutely.
What stage are we on?
We're in a political. It was New York, man. You know, honestly, I know you've been in LA, but.
Okay, yeah, anyone else? Yes.
I wanted to, actually, it's a question for Dave. I wanted to ask about the casting of Alone, because I wondered, when I first saw him, on this, he looked like with a sort of Versace type shirt and things. It wasn't clear that the character is, I guess, Israeli or ex-Israeli, right?
Yeah.
Was it built on the fact that he is Israeli, or you cast him?
No, it was built that he was Israeli.
Yeah.
Yep, the
He
character.
was
from the
originally
start.
from where again? I can't remember. Where was Avi's character originally from?
Oh, I don't know. I thought he was always Israeli.
And he's great. He's such a guy. Listen, every time I see him, like every once in a while, I would say, "Well, should we kill him?" And I would go, "No, we can't kill him. We need him forever."
Spoiler alert, by
Because
the
he's
way.
just so cool. Because a whole different sensibility.
I kill him in episode 5.
Here in the States, he's being cast in a certain way, and sort of a lot of these kind of roles. Whereas if you see him in some of the work he's done in Israel, it's very different, and his range is amazing.
I believe that. It's just that he's created a character that I love so much. That I'm just like, oh God, I just really, I love that little stomach of his. He has that little stomach, and he's gonna kill you too. How you can't beat that?
There's a touch of Robert Evans to that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish I knew who that was.
It's obvious.
The kid stays in the picture.
Walter
we'll
can tell
detail
you.
Thank you.
No, that's, and also it's that thing about, this kind of like fantasy about white people, I mean, like, if you call Avi white, he would just look at you, huh? It's like, because it's not a thing. I mean, my mother, that whole side of my family is Jewish, and whenever Jews come up to me and they say I'm white, I say, man, you don't know your history. You really don't. It's a notion of like, and he's so good at creating it, but the show's great at creating it. The show's great at all these different kinds of people. They all come together. They're just not the same, and that's what's so wonderful. All these really different kinds of Chicanos, which is a really big thing for America, to have like, not to have Hispanic. Like everybody's different, and you watch it and you go, well, some people are in Mexico, some people are from up north, some people are from very wealthy families, some people are very poor, some people are in the gangs, some people are not, and it's really, it's just wonderful.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask my question of the DP.
He's been waiting.
The colors, they seem to kind of shimmer in this, and the green. It seems like green is very important. Can you talk a little bit about the color scheme of this show, what is being done, and to what end? Like, what are you trying to evoke with the way this looks, the way it feels?
Well, basically, I assigned a color, or we assigned a color palette to each plot line. So the African American plot line had what we refer to as jewel colors, and you can see that at night those are sodium vapor lights. They're very warm. Something that doesn't exist anymore because they've been overtaken by LED street lights.
I was going to ask you about that because at night now it's kind of a cold blue, right?
So we made what we called pillowcases that we stuck over LED street lights so that they would look yellow.
Wow.
And then the CIA is very desaturated and kind of gray and cold. And the Hispanic plot line has more saturated colors, right? And then the Israeli drug dealer, he is sort of the Miami Vice kind of look. and that's pretty simplistic, but once you weave those things together, the simplicity of it gets a little overtaken by, by the tapestry of it. And then what it allows you to do, I think, is to instantly see on the screen which story you're now with, because the color changes. You go, all right, I'm with these guys. So that's how those color comes.
That's great.
What do you do when one of those worlds merges into the other one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I put my money on what I thought the dominant player was within that scene.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, essentially, spoiler alert. You can tell who's going to win the scene based on.
Right. And it happens more and more as the episodes progress, and
that's
CIA
very
guys
cool.
get more involved with
Yeah.
American guys.
This is the greatest show ever.
That's really neat.
But can I just say one thing? Because it sounds like that's really helpful and everything. But without the character of Franklin being played by the person on the stage with us today, I don't think the whole thing's worth watching. It doesn't matter what the color palette is.
Yeah.
I mean, the creation of that character and the way Damson plays that guy, to me, are the riveting things, and it doesn't matter what color you put on him.
Here.
Yeah. even if we don't
The
like
only
it.
thing I'll say is, you may wonder which accent is real, because I often did. I'm pretty sure the British accent is fake.
Well, I actually had that reaction in the green room.
That would be really funny.
So wait, did you not know at all until we
No,
got
I
on the
don't.
green
I
room?
don't look. I really don't read the biography, but like, it's like they grew up. I
Yeah.
don't care. All I care is, do I believe them in the part?
Yeah.
It's like I don't. The David Copperfield part of it, I'm not so into. I thought one more question.
DP, a question also. Did you work on each episode? Was it the same director and same director
No.
of photography on each episode, or did you?
No, I alternate episodes with another director of photography who used to be my camera operator.
Oh, okay.
Years ago,
So he worked under you. He learned from you.
So we've known each other for a long time, and then we had different directors
On every
each episode. But
Okay.
but by alternating, that allowed us to prep with the incoming director, which is kind of a new way of shooting television, and more people are doing it, and the results have been really good, I think, budgetarily as well as creative.
And they had some really great directors.
Oh man,
They were
amazing.
really good. It's
Amazing.
like shockingly good.
Alex Graves.
Oh my God.
Well, Dan Adius, who did
Yeah.
the episode you just
Yeah.
watched, who's incredible, who did our third episode last year, and then a couple really young, talented people.
Sunu.
Yeah, named Sunu, South African, who did the second episode, and then we had a director drop out for 9, and we brought him back to do the 9th episode. He was actually the only one who did 2 this year.
So good.
So this kind of wonderful mix of veterans who've been doing it a long time, that Tommy Shalami just picks up the phone like Lindley and says, come play.
That's great.
And then we go and find young people who haven't had chances. I mean, I've been really, really proud of the amount of like new directors where this has been the first episode they did. In fact, we had a woman, named Logan, shadow Dan Adius on this episode, who had just done a couple very indie movies. So she went through the process with him, and then she came back to do the 8th episode, and Dan took time out of his schedule to come and go with her through the process and prep.
Yeah.
It's really, it's a lovely thing to see people get that shot and deliver. They all just knocked it out of the
Always.
park. It's really.
Daniel Adius is one of those directors that and there are, there's so many people directing TV that it doesn't happen very often, but I kind of know.
Yeah.
I kind of know when it's him. And that's not to say that he's inappropriately superimposing his personality on everything, but there's a particular vibe that he has, I think. Like a Michelle MacLaren, who directed some of the greatest episodes of Breaking Bad, I think she has a vibe like.
Yeah, I mean, these directors, this is the real deal. It's not, TV isn't what it once was, where you just came in and you phoned it in and went on to the next thing. I mean, the directors come in, they're super passionate, they have style, they really, and then you have somebody like John to ground them and really make sure you're playing in our sandbox. But once you're in our sandbox, build the castle however you want.
And you also have the depth. I just think mentioning Tommy Shalami is a thing. Tommy did West Wing, and he has like he's really deeply involved in the history of television. I think that you feel that when you have those meetings, with this kind of these people who, like, you write something and then these people call you and say, well, all that was wrong, do this. But Tommy was a big part of that group of people, and you could feel confident that the people that he brought in, and also the knowledge that brought in, was really good for us. I think it was you really learned from them. I learned a lot from that room, I tell you.
Thomas Schlamme is actually, how many of you have heard that name before? Yeah, okay.
And once you hear it, you don't forget it.
No, well, because actually, what you were talking about, that thing you see, every television show practically does it now, where there's two people walking side by side at an extremely fast rate of speed, weaving around stuff, and people are weaving around them, and things are going this way and that way. And it's like
That's
you're on a
Tommy.
jet-propelled sled, but they're delivering exposition, but you feel like you're on a roller coaster. Schlamme, that's him. That's him. He basically invented a way of photographing people.
Yeah, the walk-in time. I mean, you took Aaron Sorkin and made it visually riveting.
Yeah.
I think up until then, people had been happy to just kind of, well, it's Sorkin's dialogues, just put him over there and let him talk, and you just don't get in the way. But he found a way to elevate it.
Yeah.
He's the real deal. He's amazing.
Yeah, he turns in and what actions. You were going to say something?
Yeah, he walked me through that huge long West Wing shot. We went to the building, it's where the old Oscars used to be, right? And he walked me with it. And it was the longest hallway in the world. It's like got up steps, everything. He did one shot in West Wing, and he walked me through it.
Well, that's the guy you want to walk you through a scene like that. That's like, Michael Jordan teaches you how to shoot a three-pointer.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
You wonder why you can't.
Yeah, you wonder why you can't, exactly. So, okay, well, folks, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you for our